Hear me very clearly today. One of the imageries that God gives us is that God places shepherds over his sheep. The sheep that we have today, and the ones I'm speaking to, could be presidents of governments, could be ministers in our country or in the nations, could be professors in universities, could be some of the most brilliant minds, but you are still sheep by imagery and analogy. God places shepherds over you. These shepherds must lead you. This is not the time for rebellion, which equates to insubordination and witchcraft. This is not the time to fight those who lead you, unless they are ungodly leaders and manipulators, and they extract from you, and they mislead you. But the Spirit of God will warn you about that, so that you can find the right leaders. But people are called to follow godly leaders. Let me give you Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. What a beautiful imagery. Sheep are led. Sheep are, the imagery is that they submit to the voice of the shepherd. They trust. They believe. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And we know the corporeal principle of how the Lord leads today with under-shepherds who shepherd our souls, will lead us in this time. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness, the templates designed in heaven, for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, no evil, no pestilence, no financial recession, for you are with me. And listen to this, and there's a corporeal principle, the principle of representation, of the power of attorney, of deputization. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod is a symbol of patriarchal, governmental, kingly leadership. In the new covenant, it's called the leaders. These are apostles. These are apostles that lead large communities, large streams of people. That's your rod. The staff are your local congregations. The elders and pastors of local congregations, which includes bishops over groups of congregations, overseers over groups of congregations in regions. Many that lead local groups of congregations, clans. They are not apostles, but they are overseers. They are bishops, as in the Old Testament. Paul would meet with the overseers of congregations, elders, and together he would tell them things that they should do. We need to bring back the rod and the staff. And this has to work in tandem, in congruence. This is a time where it's of critical importance that the church hears me, that the rod and the staff must bring comfort, encouragement, definition, direction, counsel, and information to our people. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord, in the family of God. That's what the house means. This is not heaven. I will dwell in the family of God, in a safe location, with an under shepherd over me, with an apostolic leader over me. I will dwell in the house of the Lord, the family of God, forever. So I'm calling upon leaders today. Leaders to arise. I can't overemphasize it. Fathers, take your places in the natural. Spiritual fathers, take your places. Apostles of groups, please don't let this become a titular status. This is a time where your true apostolic leadership, if you are truly an apostle, should be known. This is a very serious time. The Apostle Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 3, and it's a whole lot. I would strongly recommend you read chapter 3, chapter 4. In fact, the whole writings of Paul to Timothy are fundamental for a time such as this. But he says, but I know this, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves. And now we have this conceited form of leadership in the world today. Self-preservation, self-centeredness, lovers of self, narcissistic, lovers of self, lovers of money. I will talk about that a little later on, but I think many ministries will be tested today if they love money more than they love the Lord. The rich, those that have, will be tested whether you love money more in the last days than you love the Lord. This is the spirit of mammon. It's called unrighteous mammon. God hates it. It's called filthy lucre. And some people love it. And we know this virus is even teaching us today that we can't even touch the currencies, the notes, the paper, because we are fearful of becoming contaminated by or infected by the virus. But some people love money. And this is the time where all this will happen. Boasters, full of themselves, proud, blasphemers. Mark these words, disobedient to parents. I've heard people say publicly, we will not submit to him, he's another man. You have a spiritual parent, you have a natural parent. We have to learn how to become obedient to parents. Judgment will come in this hour. Unthankful, unholy, unloving, cold, callous, indifferent, hardened. Like the Levite who saw a bleeding Samaritan. Like the priest from the house of Aaron who walked by a Samaritan that was bleeding to death. Unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. This caricatures, and listen, Paul is not speaking to the world out there. He's not extracting the behavior, the social behavior, the cultural behavior of the times, the popular culture. He's talking to people in the church. And he says this will happen in the last days. And if some of us believe we are living in that time, we need to stock take. We have to be introspective in a time like this. And from such people, turn away. Such congregations, such households, such patterns of behavior, turn away. Listen to how it's compared. Because I'm talking about houses here. Houses, I'm talking about people groups, I'm talking about families. Build your house on the rock. If these people are in households, those are not the households you want to be in. For of this sort are those who creep into households and turn captive gullible women. This is leaderless households, fatherless households. apostle-less households. Not every household will be led by an apostle, but every household should be connected to an apostle and to a group that is headed by an apostle, who creep into households, into families. You can take this in the natural, but Paul is speaking to an elder at Timothy who is giving oversight to a family of churches in Asia. And Paul is saying they are like gullible women. In other words, when there's an absence of leadership, that's a widow's house. And please, I'm not being derogatory when I use the reference, the gender women, because I believe that women can lead churches. But these are gullible women. In other words, they're like a widow's house, like a single parent headed house. Gullible woman, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. That's why I'm asking for headship to come back into churches, whether it's headed by a woman or a man. I don't care about the gender. I'm talking about the grace now. Always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of truth, of the truth. They're always in our churches, but they will not submit. They will not bow. They are arrogant. They are rebellious. They challenge every statement leaders make. Such individuals are gullible, and they're compared to gullible, silly, foolish women. And those are crude statements to make on live streaming. But I make it not in the context of gender, but in the context of leadership. Now, as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds, they are referred now as men of corrupt minds, disapproved concerning the faith. But they will progress no further in the season, in the last days, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. And who is Jannes and Jambres? I mean, these were two famous magicians in Egypt who, according to extra-biblical tradition, used their art to deceive Pharaoh from permitting the nation of Israel being released. Later it is said that they somehow or the other seem to have subtly crept into the nation of Israel and were part of the mixed crowd, another tradition says. And somehow or the other violated, they violated and opposed and rebelled against the leadership of Moses and Aaron. Who is Aaron? Who is Moses? These were the individuals that even promoted the creation of the golden calf. And such individuals are in the church today. And we cannot have such individuals come and resist the kind of leadership that God is calling. But this is what Paul said when he spoke about the rod. He said, but you have carefully followed my doctrine, manner of life, purpose of faith, long-suffering, love, perseverance, persecutions, afflictions, which happened to me at Antioch, at Iconium, at Lystra. What persecutions I endured, and out of them all the Lord delivered me. Yes, and all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. But evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse in this time, deceiving and being deceived. But you must continue in the things that you have learned and have been assured of, knowing from whom you have learned them. These are the words of Paul to Timothy. And I want to say that today, leaders will have to arise to speak to their Timothys, to the pastors, to the elders of churches. And Paul says this, and that from childhood you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith, which is in Christ Jesus.